NBS Frontline.
Well, if you want to join the conversation, the hashtag is NBS Frontline. You can join us on Facebook, on Twitter, and all our social media platforms. We want to thank our partner media houses, the radio stations that are tuned in. Next Radio are on, 106.1 is already on, and we also have 88.4 Voice of Teso, 91.5 Mighty Fire FM in Kitgum, and 90.2 Radio King FM. Please tune in and join the conversation. Well, another issue that is arousing a serious debate is the recently passed Landlord Tenant Bill 2018. Well, it's something that has been widely perceived that instead of settling the scores between tenants and landlords, it's instead giving tenants more leverage over tenants, but well, or rather tenants over landlords. But well, Honorable Barrio Munsi will tell us more about the spirit of this, but we first want to hear from a representative of the landlords. This is coming after a very protracted series of negotiations between landlords and several other stakeholders that took them to Parliament. But for now, let's engage Mr. Walusimbi. He's a lawyer from Crane Management Services to give us their thoughts, their views on this very thorny subject. Good evening, Mr. Walusimbi, and thank you for joining us. How would you react to the Landlords Tenants Bill 2018?
Good evening, Simon. Good evening, Simon. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening, Simon.
I do hear you, yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, this current bill is offensive on many fronts. Landlords, and in fact many tenants, including myself, look at it as a step back from free market economics. It's a case of overregulation, which we know is never right, and is a step into a legal minefield. We can expound on it. But very briefly, summarily, this being a season for soccer, we could say it lacks fair play. And on many scores, again, like we've said, on many scores, like we've said, it has many clauses that are unfair. We've talked about one that bars landlords from annoying tenants without clarifying on what annoyance actually is. Already under different laws, including the penal laws, we have similar provisions. One against trespass, if a landlord were to unfairly interfere in with one's property. It offends we already have the Contract Act, which provides for the freedom of grown persons to enter into contractual relations as they wish. Now, in this current state, the present bill, one, has a mandatory contractual format, which is first insufficient, given the rate at which real estate business has actually prospered. And again, we understand, and we've had many engagements, including with Casita, that yes, there have been challenges, particularly downtown it appears, with about 3 or 5 particular landlords who have been in the habit of, for example, not giving contracts to their tenants. But this is not representative of the entire real estate sector. Much of it has actually progressed so much that many of the real estate developers, in fact, appear to be among the top taxpayers in the country already. We have cases of Knight Frank, we have Crane Management Services. Casita has considered is a very organized entity. Now, so whatever law one could come up with, ideally should be target those few landlords, the 4 or 5, we're not even sure of their names, who are into the habit of wantonly closing up their tenants' premises, not giving contracts and the like. And of course, you'll find that even these are away from the tax radar. So, the few bad apples. So, you do not need to approach it with a scorched earth policy to go after the entire sector. Of course, again, legally speaking, there are issues of, for example, on one hand, the law seems to makes it very hard to evict even an unpaying tenant. You have to give notice of 3 to 6 months. Already, the legal minefield you have already entered is even constitutional, because you're depriving a landlord then of their property. And I'm sure, if of course not handled now, then some people are going to pay attention to it in the coming period. You're of course already also impeding the freedom of association. Many landlords and tenants already have settled contractual relations they don't wish to interfere with. Even the few who actually are paying, for example, in dollars, we've heard a lot about that. But again, you can't make a law for a 1 kilometer radius within Kampala Central, because this is supposed to be a national law. Generally in Uganda, very few people pay outside the Uganda shillings. Yeah. Very few people pay outside the Uganda shillings.
Nelson,
yes,
if
please.
I could just interject here, do you want to look at this as a Kasita-driven bill?
On one hand, it's driven by misinformation. Yes, Kasita has had a hand. I do not want to believe that Kasita's intention was to create an unfair law. I think, and I've heard from them that initially their interest was in a balanced law. But again, a balanced law to what extent? If you already had the Contracts Act providing that parties can contract, and there are very many parties that actually have contracted, are those the people you wanted to regulate again a second time, when countries are in fact moving away from over-regulation, because it actually impedes business? Yeah. Or did you want to go after those 4 or 5 landlords downtown who don't give contracts, who act as though they are above the law? Yeah, so I'm not so eager to apportion this blame to Kasita, who are actually partners. And in fact, of course, on many fronts, there are as well landlords here and there. Yes.
Well, Mr. Nelson Walusimbi, thank you very much for sharing your opinion with us on behalf of landlords. Well, as it stands, Honorable Bariomunsi, the landlords seem outraged by this bill. And if you could just, for starters, give us the spirit behind this and the letter in it.
Well, thank you very much for this. Well, the Landlord and Tenant Bill 2018 is a piece of legislation which we put together as a government through our Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to define and streamline the relationship between housing tenants and housing landlords, particularly residential and commercial premises. And it is not true that it is tilted in favor of tenants versus landlords. We tried as much as possible to balance the interests of both the landlords and the tenants. And the Ministry of Lands, where I fall, because directly falls under me, this bill, has been processing this bill since 2012. This is 2019. And when I joined the ministry in 2016, I found the process on. And I actually directed that we should repeat the consultations and even have more engagements. And we've been engaging with the landlords, with the tenants, with the bankers, all different stakeholders have made an input.
Was there consensus from the landlords?
Well, I could say largely yes, but there are some contentious issues where they could not agree with the tenants, definitely. But there has been a process of consultation and getting views and ideas and input from a cross-section of stakeholders until when we came up with this law that tries to balance. But definitely the experience with this kind of legislation is that the landlords usually find themselves the other way and the tenants the other way. So our duty as the government is that we try to narrow the bridge, narrow the gap, and try to accommodate the interest of both parties. So it is not true the way the bill has been formulated. There are responsibilities and obligations of tenants. There are those for landlords. Even the
but for now, it looks skewed more towards favoring tenants.
I think many people who
look at a tenant who spends 6 months in a premise without paying.
Hold it. Many commentators who are speaking about the bill seem not to have read it. You are just speaking from what you hear in the public, like listening to the lawyer. I am not very certain whether he has thoroughly read what the bill clearly says, for instance, in clause 9, it says circumstances where a tenant may repair the premises. Does that one favor the tenant or?
Must you legislate?
No.
One.
Tenant, let me see, duties and obligations of landlords and tenants. If you look at tenants, a tenant not to use the premises for an unlawful purpose. I want you to see whether it favors the landlord or tenant. Tenant shall not cause a nuisance or interference. Tenant not to damage premises or common areas. A tenant to keep rented premises clean. Tenant not to install fixtures or make alterations without consent of the landlord. A tenant to pay rent. We provide, for instance, that the tenant should, in addition to paying rent, to pay for a security deposit.
Okay.
We are saying, for instance, if a tenant is to assign a tenancy, he or she must do so with the consent of the landlord. Even subletting of premises, you must get consent from the landlord. And these are provisions which actually strengthen the position of a landlord in this relationship. It's therefore not true. It's not correct to say that the bill is skewed in favor of tenants.
Okay, let's look at the issues that landlords are raising.
Yes.
That you cannot evict a tenant, and you need to give a tenant a space of 6 months within which to evict. That you need to get a letter from
not to evict, to terminate a tenancy. If you want to terminate tenancy, you write to the tenant, say, I intend to terminate our tenancy with 6 months, so that you prepare.
And you
to
give
get
them
off.
6 months.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Why not? I mean, I have rented your premises. I have spent money to put the merchandise in the shop. Is it fair to say tomorrow you must leave my shop? I have a friend of mine who evicted a chief administrative officer at midnight through a phone call, and he instructed his people, remove that cow from my house. Yes, much as it is your house, but is it fair? Because you have a relationship. This tenant has paid money. Much as the property belongs to you, we are saying there must be mutual and cordial relationship, mutual respect between the landlord and the tenant. It is not correct, simply because you own the property, that you should mistreat the tenant. When the tenant is also paying rent, he's not using a property for free. So what this law tries to do is that we promote a cordial relationship, we promote mutual respect between the landlord and the tenant. And it is not correct to say that the law favors landlords against tenants.
But on a wider scale,
yes,
landlords have rejected this law. Yesterday we spoke to the chairperson of Uganda Real Estate Agents Association. We hosted him here and he said they are very uncomfortable with it. It offends the very spirit upon which they need to work with tenants.
No, but they have been part of this process. We had consultations. When I
Are they making a U-turn?
When I tabled this bill in the parliament, the committee responsible in parliament invited all stakeholders. They gave their views, and their views were captured. So they should not behave as if the law is alien, as if they are just seeing it for the first time. And if they are comfortable with some provision, they should say so. Are they saying the whole law is bad for them? That's what they are saying.
Well, it has...
or are they saying it is not good to regulate that relationship? Or is it Uganda, the only country which has this kind of law? Because this law exists in very many countries.
NBS Frontline.